Have you ever wondered how some people manage to maintain absolute clarity in the most chaotic moments, while others simply freeze, panic, or make catastrophic decisions they later regret? There is something profoundly fascinating about the ability to think under pressure, to make precise decisions when everything around is crumbling, when time is running out, and when the consequences of each choice can determine the course of your life or even your survival. This type of mental clarity is not a divine gift. It is not luck. It is not something that only a few people are born with. It is a skill, a technique, a method that can be developed and perfected through specific principles that have been studied and applied for over 2,000 years. And if there is a character that viscerally embodies this ability to think under pressure, to maintain absolute control in extreme situations, that character is Batman. Bruce Wayne has transformed into something beyond a man. He has become a symbol precisely because he developed a stoic mental method that allows him to operate at levels of pressure that would destroy any ordinary person. And today you will learn exactly how to apply Batman's stoic method in your own life, in extreme situations, to think under pressure in a surgical manner, to make impossible decisions with clarity, and to never lose emotional control when you need it the most. What makes Batman's stoic method so devastatingly effective is not physical strength, not technology, not gadgets or money. The true power lies in the mental architecture he has built over decades of rigorous training, a psychological structure that makes him immune to the emotional chaos that paralyzes most people in extreme situations. When you observe Batman in action, whether facing the Joker, disarming a bomb about to explode, or making strategic decisions that will affect millions of lives, you notice something extraordinary. He does not hesitate, does not panic, does not let fear or anger take over. There is a calculated serenity in every movement, a coldness that does not mean a lack of emotion, but rather total mastery over it. And this is the essence of Stoicism applied in extreme situations, the ability to recognize emotions without being a slave to them, to feel without being dominated, to act with reason even when instinct screams for you to react impulsively. Batman's Stoic method is based on three central pillars that anyone can develop. And when you understand these three pillars, you gain access to a level of mental control that completely transforms the way you deal with pressure, crises, and difficult decisions. The first pillar is the dichotomy of control, a fundamental Stoic concept that separates what is under your control from what is completely outside of it. In extreme situations, most people waste precious mental energy trying to control the uncontrollable, worrying about external variables, about what others will think, about hypothetical possibilities, about catastrophic scenarios that may never happen. This mental dispersion is lethal when you need to think under pressure because it fragments your attention and consumes cognitive resources that should be focused on the immediate solution. Batman applies the dichotomy of control impeccably. When he is in a critical situation, he does not waste time lamenting what he should have done differently, does not dwell on past mistakes, does not paralyze himself thinking about future consequences that are beyond his direct influence. He concentrates 100% of his mental energy on what can be controlled at that exact moment, on the actions he can execute, on the decisions he needs to make, on the movements that are under his absolute command. This ability to filter out mental noise and focus exclusively on what matters is what allows him to think under pressure with a clarity that seems superhuman. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, taught over 2,000 years ago that freedom begins when you understand this fundamental distinction. He said that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the opinions we form about them. This means that in extreme situations, chaos does not come from the external situation, but from how your mind interprets and reacts to it. When you master the dichotomy of control, you stop fighting against reality and start working with it in a strategic way. The second pillar is negative visualization, a Stoic practice known as premeditatio malorum, which means premeditation of evils. This technique may sound morbid or pessimistic to those who do not understand its true function, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful tools for developing mental resilience and the ability to think under pressure. Batman's Stoic method includes constant mental preparation for the worst possible scenarios. Bruce Wayne does not just train his body, he trains his mind to deal with catastrophes, with losses, with extreme situations that would test the limits of any human being. He visualizes his allies dying, visualizes Gotham being destroyed, visualizes his plans failing completely. This is not mental masochism, it is strategic preparation. When you practice negative visualization regularly, something extraordinary happens in your brain. You dramatically reduce the emotional impact of adverse events when they actually occur, because your mind has already processed that possibility, has already rehearsed the response, has already anticipated the emotions that will come. This means that when pressure arrives, when the extreme situation materializes, you are not caught by surprise. Do not go into shock. Do not freeze. You have already been mentally in that place, have already trained the response, have already developed the ability to think under pressure in that specific context. Marcus Aurelius, Roman emperor and practitioner of Stoicism, wrote in his meditations that we should mentally prepare every day to encounter unpleasant people, to face obstacles, to deal with unforeseen events. Not to become negative or pessimistic, but to not be surprised and to maintain serenity when these things inevitably happen. Batman takes this to the extreme because the extreme situations he faces require this level of mental preparation. The third pillar of Batman's Stoic method is emotional self-control through recognition and redirection, a skill that separates those who act with reason from those who react impulsively in extreme situations. Here is a devastating mistake that most people make when trying to think under pressure. They believe they need to suppress emotions, push them under the rug, pretend they do not exist. This is a recipe for disaster because repressed emotions do not disappear. They just accumulate until they explode at the most inopportune moment possible. Batman's Stoic method does not rely on suppressing emotions, but on recognizing them, understanding them, and redirecting them constructively. When Bruce Wayne feels anger, he does not deny that he is angry. When he feels fear, he does not pretend that fear does not exist. He acknowledges these emotions, identifies their origin, understands what they are signaling, and then makes the conscious decision of how he will respond to them. This is the crucial difference between reacting and responding. Reacting is automatic, impulsive, emotional. Responding is deliberate, calculated, rational. In extreme situations, those who react lose control. Those who respond maintain power. Seneca, the Roman Stoic philosopher, wrote extensively about anger and how it is the most destructive emotion when not managed properly. He explained that anger is like a wild horse that can take you anywhere, even to the abyss, unless you hold the reins and direct that energy intentionally. Batman understands this deeply. His entire existence as a vigilante arose from a tragedy that could have consumed him in destructive anger. But instead of letting that emotion control him, he transformed it into fuel for his mission, into unwavering determination, into absolute focus. When you are under extreme pressure, your emotions intensify dramatically. Fear becomes sharper, anger more intense, frustration more overwhelming. It is at this moment that most people lose the ability to think under pressure with clarity, because emotions hijack the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thinking and complex decision-making. This phenomenon is known as emotional hijacking of the amygdala, where the primitive part of your brain takes control and you enter fight, flight, or freeze mode. Batman's Stoic method works by creating a space between the emotional stimulus and the behavioral response. In that space lies your freedom of choice, your ability to think under pressure, your power to consciously decide how you will act instead of being a slave to automatic reactions. How do you develop that space? Through a practice that the Stoics called prososche, which means attention or constant mental vigilance. It is the ability to observe your own thoughts and emotions in real time, to become a conscious spectator of the mental processes happening within you. When you develop this skill, you can identify when an emotion is starting to take over you and can intervene before it completely seizes your ability to reason. Batman practices this constantly. Notice how in extreme situations he often takes a pause, however brief, before acting. He breathes, assesses, calculates. This pause is Batman's stoic method in action. It is the moment where he acknowledges what he is feeling and consciously decides how he will respond. Another crucial aspect of Batman's stoic method in extreme situations is what the Stoics refer to as the view from above, or cosmic perspective. When you are immersed in a crisis, when the pressure is overwhelming, your perspective narrows dangerously. You get trapped in the immediate details, the urgency of the moment, the emotional intensity of the situation. This tunnel vision prevents you from thinking strategically under pressure because you lose sight of the bigger context, the long-term consequences, the alternatives that are not immediately obvious. Batman's stoic method includes the deliberate practice of taking a mental step back, even in the most chaotic moments, and observing the situation from a broader perspective. Marcus Aurelius practiced this by imagining himself looking at Earth from space, seeing cities as tiny dots, individual problems as minuscule in the grand scheme of things. This is not to minimize the real challenges, but to maintain proper proportion and prevent the pressure of the moment from completely distorting your judgment. Batman does this when he is in the midst of a seemingly impossible battle. He asks himself what the real objective is, what the broader strategy is, how this situation fits into the larger context of his mission. This ability to switch between microscopic focus on immediate details and macroscopic vision of the big picture is what allows him to think under pressure with a strategic sophistication that seems superhuman. Meticulous preparation is another essential component of Batman's stoic method that enables him to think under pressure with maximum effectiveness. There is a fundamental principle that many people overlook when talking about dealing with extreme situations. The quality of your thinking under pressure is directly proportional to the quality of your preparation before the pressure. Batman does not rely solely on his ability to improvise in the moment, although that skill is also developed. He dedicates an enormous amount of time and energy preparing for future scenarios, developing contingency plans, training skills that may be needed, studying his adversaries, knowing the terrain, anticipating variables. When the pressure finally arrives, when the extreme situation materializes, he is not starting from scratch. He is executing mental protocols that have already been rehearsed hundreds of times, applying knowledge that has been deeply internalized, utilizing skills that have been refined to the point of becoming automatic. The Stoics understood this principle perfectly. They did not believe in merely reacting philosophically to adversities when they arrived. They practiced daily mental exercises to strengthen their resilience, to sharpen their judgment, to prepare their minds for the inevitable challenges that life would bring. This constant preparation is what allows one to think under pressure without panicking, because you are operating from a solid foundation of competence and prior preparation. Radical acceptance of reality is perhaps the most counterintuitive and powerful aspect of Batman's stoic method in extreme situations. When most people face a crisis, they waste precious mental energy resisting reality, wishing things were different, denying what is happening, mentally bargaining with the situation. This psychological resistance is like trying to swim against a devastating current. You only tire faster and lose the mental clarity needed to think effectively under pressure. Batman's stoic method begins with total and immediate acceptance of what is happening, not passive resignation, but active acknowledgement of reality as it is at that moment. When Batman enters an extreme situation where things have gone terribly wrong, where his plans have failed, where people he wanted to protect are in danger, he does not waste precious time lamenting how things should have been. He instantly accepts the current situation and redirects all his mental energy to work with reality as it presents itself now. The Stoics had a powerful phrase for this, amor fati, which means love of fate. It is not just passively accepting what happens, but actively embracing every situation, including extreme situations and crises, as opportunities to exercise excellence, to demonstrate character, to apply skills. This shift in mindset from victim to protagonist, from someone who suffers the circumstances to someone who acts despite them, is what allows one to think under pressure with a clarity that transforms seemingly insurmountable obstacles into solvable problems. Rational decision-making under extreme pressure requires a systematic method that Batman's stoic method applies with surgical precision. In extreme situations, you often need to make complex decisions with incomplete information, under severe time constraints, with potentially catastrophic consequences. This combination of factors is what causes most people to freeze or make impulsive and poor decisions. Batman has developed a mental protocol for thinking under pressure that you can adapt for your own life. First, he makes a quick but thorough assessment of the controllable and uncontrollable variables, immediately applying the dichotomy of control to avoid wasting mental resources. Second, he identifies the absolute primary objective, what is most important to preserve or achieve in that situation, because in extreme situations you often cannot save everything or everyone, and trying to do so results in losing everything. Third, he quickly generates multiple action alternatives, never fixating on a single option because that creates dangerous mental rigidity. Fourth, he evaluates each alternative not only by the potential outcomes, but also by the values and principles that guide his mission. Because decisions made under extreme pressure that violate your core values always generate destructive long-term consequences. Fifth, he makes the decision and fully commits to it, eliminating the hesitation that kills momentum in extreme situations. Sixth, he executes with absolute focus but maintains flexibility to adjust if new information arises. This systematic method is what allows one to think under pressure consistently effectively, even when the stakes are at their highest. Managing cognitive load is a technical aspect of Batman's Stoic method that is rarely discussed but is absolutely crucial in extreme situations. Your brain has a limited capacity for conscious processing at any given moment. When you are under extreme pressure, that capacity becomes even more compromised due to stress, intense emotions, and mental fatigue. If you try to consciously process every variable, every detail, every possibility, you quickly overload your cognitive system, and your ability to think under pressure completely collapses. Batman addresses this through three specific strategies. First, automation of fundamental skills through intense repetitive training, so that basic actions occur without consuming conscious cognitive resources. Second, externalization of information whenever possible, using technology, records, systems that keep critical information accessible without overloading working memory. Third, radical simplification of decision-making through clear principles and pre-established protocols that reduce the number of variables that need to be consciously processed at the moment of pressure. The Stoics also practice this simplification through their fundamental principles. Instead of trying to calculate each situation from scratch, they had cardinal virtues that served as decision guides: courage, justice, temperance, and wisdom. When you have clear principles established in advance, you dramatically reduce the cognitive load of thinking under pressure because many decisions are essentially predetermined by those core values. Resilience through meaning is the final element of Batman's Stoic method that allows one not only to think under pressure but also to endure prolonged pressures that would break ordinary people. Viktor Frankl, a survivor of Nazi concentration camps and founder of logotherapy, discovered that the prisoners who survived were not necessarily the physically strongest, but those who maintained a sense of meaning and purpose even in the most extreme imaginable situations. Batman operates under immense pressures constantly because his mission is anchored in a deep purpose that transcends his personal comfort or even his survival. He is not just fighting crime because it is fun or because he enjoys violence. He is fulfilling a mission that gives meaning to the tragedy he suffered, that honors the memory of his parents, that protects others from suffering the same fate. This deep meaning is what allows one to think under extreme pressure repeatedly without breaking, because even when the situation is desperate, the purpose remains intact. The Stoics understood that a life of excellence, a virtuous life, is the only sustainable source of satisfaction and resilience. Not momentary pleasure, not superficial comfort, but the deep knowledge that you are living according to your highest values and contributing to something greater than yourself. When you have this, situations' extremes cease to be merely threats to be avoided and become tests of your character, opportunities to prove your principles, moments where you can demonstrate who you really are when everything is at stake. If you have made it this far, comment Stoic method, so I know that you have fully absorbed this knowledge. Apply these principles the next time you face a high-pressure situation. even if it is something smaller like an important presentation or a difficult conversation, and observe how your ability to think under pressure transforms completely when you operate from this stoic method that made Batman mentally unbeatable in extreme situations.